7 highly trained flawless nurses quit the Russo estate in less than a month. Most left in tears. 1 left in an ambulance. Damien Russo was a monster who broke people for sport. Then came Sophia Grace. At 250 pounds, she didn't run. She pushed back. The iron gates of the Russo compound in Staten Island looked less like a sanctuary and more like a high-security prison. Sophia Grace sat in her beat-up Honda Civic, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, staring at the surveillance cameras tracking her every move. She was sweating. Her thighs chafed uncomfortably in her cheap navy blue scrubs, and her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She shouldn't be here. She was a trauma nurse from the chaotic ERs of downtown Manhattan, not a private caregiver for New York's criminal elite. But her father, a man with a lethal addiction to underground poker, owed $60,000 to some very unforgiving people. The agency had offered her $20,000 a week for this assignment. All she had to do was keep the notorious syndicate boss, Damien Russo, alive and comfortable while he recovered from an assassination attempt. 20 grand, Sophia muttered to herself, wiping the sweat from her plump cheeks. I can deal with a mobster for 3 weeks. She was escorted inside by Victor Kovac, Damien's head of security. Victor was a mountain of a man in a tailored suit, his face a map of old knife fights. As he walked her through the opulent, terrifyingly quiet mahogany halls, his eyes kept flickering to her heavy frame with unmistakable skepticism. "You're the new night nurse," Victor stated, his voice like gravel. "The agency said you had a thick skin. You're going to need it." The last one, Chloe Miller, lasted exactly 4 days before she ran out of here having a panic attack. "I don't have panic attacks, Mr. Kovac." Sophia said, her breathing heavy as she struggled to keep up with his long strides on the marble floor. "I have bills." Victor stopped outside a heavy oak double door. "Rule number 1, do not ask questions about his business. Rule number 2, do not touch the blinds. He likes the room dark. Rule number 3, if he throws something at you, duck and do not cry. He hates crying." Victor opened the door. The master bedroom was suffocatingly hot and smelled sharply of copper-stale sweat and expensive antiseptic. In the center of the room lay a massive 4-poster bed. Damien Russo looked like a fallen Roman gladiator. His torso was heavily bandaged, covering 4 gunshot wounds that had nearly shredded his liver and punctured a lung. He was pale, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with fever sweat, but his dark, hollowed eyes burned with an intense, violent fury. As Sophia stepped into the room, Damien blindly grabbed a heavy crystal water glass from his nightstand and hurled it. It shattered against the doorframe inches from Sophia's head. "Get out!" Damien roared, his voice rough and ragged. "I told Victor no more useless, trembling little girls. I need a goddamn doctor, not another agency bimbo." Sophia didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She slowly bent down her knees, popping slightly under her weight, and picked up the largest shard of broken glass. She walked over to the trash can, deposited it, and then moved to the foot of his bed. She crossed her thick arms over her chest, staring him down. Damien blinked, his chest heaving. He finally seemed to take in her appearance. Sophia was fat. There was no sugarcoating it. She had a round face, a heavy chin, a broad chest, and a stomach that pressed prominently against the fabric of her scrubs. She was the absolute antithesis of the delicate, conventionally beautiful women who usually surrounded a man of his wealth and power. Damien let out a dark, breathless sneer. "What the hell is this, Victor? You brought me a whale to crush me to death." The insult hung in the air, sharp and cruel. A younger, more fragile Sophia might have crumbled. But this Sophia was tired, broke, and fresh off a 12-hour shift in a city hospital. "If I wanted to crush you, Mr. Russo, I'd just sit on you," Sophia said, her voice deadpan and flat. "And honestly, given your current condition, it wouldn't take much. Now are you going to stop throwing tantrums like a toddler? Or am I going to have to strap you to the rails to check your sutures?" Silence descended on the room. Victor, lingering in the doorway, suddenly stiffened, his hand hovering near his shoulder holster. Nobody spoke to Damien Russo like that. Not his enemies, and certainly not his staff. Damien stared at her, his dark eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. The muscle in his jaw ticked. He was waiting for her to break eye contact, waiting for the familiar tremor of fear. But Sophia just stood there, grounded by her own mass, her stance wide and unbothered. "You have 3 minutes to change my dressings." Damien finally growled, his head falling back onto the pillows. "If it hurts, I'll have Victor break your fingers." "If you have Victor break my fingers, you'll be changing your own dressings," Sophia shot back, casually snapping on a pair of latex gloves. "And frankly, I don't think you have the core strength for it right now." She approached the bed. Her hands were large, warm, and remarkably steady. As she began to peel back the heavy gauze on his abdomen, Damien braced himself for the sharp, agonizing pull that the previous nurses always caused when their hands trembled. But Sophia's touch was completely different. Her hands were confident, applying firm, even pressure that somehow minimized the pain. When it came time to clean his back wound, Damien gritted his teeth. "I can't roll over. It tears the stitches." "You don't have to do the work," Sophia said. She wedged her thick arm under his broad shoulder, placing her other hand on his uninjured hip. "On 3. Let me take your weight." She didn't struggle. The previous nurses, all petite and waif-like, had lacked the physical leverage to move a 220-pound wall of muscle without dropping him or causing agony. But Sophia used her weight as a counterbalance. With a smooth, practiced heave, she rolled him onto his side, supporting him against her soft, heavy torso, so he wouldn't fall back. For a fleeting second, Damien's cheek pressed against the soft swell of her stomach. It was warm. It was incredibly unexpectedly comforting, a stark contrast to the cold, hard reality of the life he lived. He stiffened, but he didn't pull away. "See," Sophia murmured, her breath grazing his ear as she quickly cleaned the wound. Not totally useless. By day 5, Sophia Grace was officially the longest-lasting nurse in the history of Damien Russo's recovery. The house staff looked at her like she was a ghost, walking among the living. Victor Kovac had stopped hovering with his hand on his gun, though he still watched her with a mix of utter bafflement and grudging respect. The dynamic between Sophia and Damien was a battlefield of wills. Damien hated being vulnerable. He was a predator, forced into a cage, lashing out at everything. He refused his physical therapy, he refused his meals, and he hurled insults at her daily. Sophia ignored all of it. She systematically began breaking the house rules. It started on a Tuesday morning. The room was, as always, pitch black, smelling of sickness. Sophia walked in with a tray of food, marched straight past his bed, and yanked the heavy blackout curtains wide open. Brilliant, blinding morning sunlight flooded the room. "What the hell are you doing?" Damien hissed, throwing his forearm over his eyes. "Close those damn curtains. Rule number 2. "Rule number 2 is stupid," Sophia replied calmly, setting the tray down. "You're developing a vitamin D deficiency, and sitting in the dark is making you clinically depressed. Sunlight is a natural antiseptic. Deal with it. I am the boss of the largest syndicate in the tri-state area. He barked, trying to sit up, only to wince in pain. "I give the orders in this house. You're a patient in a bed, wearing a highly undignified, open-backed gown," Sophia corrected, handing him a fork. "Eat your eggs." Damien glared at the plate. "I'm not eating that garbage. Tell the chef I want a steak, rare. You lost 3 pints of blood and your digestive tract is sluggish from the painkillers. You eat steak now, you'll be screaming in a bowel obstruction by midnight." Sophia pulled up a chair, sitting heavily beside him. "Eat the eggs, Damien." It was the first time she had used his first name. It slipped out naturally, stripping away his title and his terror. He stared at her, genuinely shocked. Then he looked at her plush, round face, devoid of any makeup, her hair tied in a messy bun. There was no deceit in her, just exhausted honesty. Grumbling curses in Italian, Damien picked up the fork and started eating the eggs. The real turning point, the twist that bound them together, happened 2 nights later. Sophia was doing her 2 a.m. rounds. The house was dead silent. Damien was asleep, his chest rising and falling in shallow, painful rhythms. His private physician, Dr. Gregory Orris, a man with expensive suits and nervous eyes, had visited earlier that evening to adjust Damien's IV medications. Sophia checked Damien's vitals. His blood pressure was alarmingly low. She frowned, moving to the IV stand to check the bags Dr. Orris had hung. She squinted at the label in the dim light. It was marked as a standard saline and antibiotic drip. But as an ER nurse, Sophia had mixed thousands of these bags. The consistency was wrong. The slight tint to the fluid. It looked exactly like an aggressive dose of heparin, a potent blood thinner. Damien's internal sutures were barely holding. If he was pumped full of high-dose blood thinners, he would hemorrhage internally. He would bleed out in his sleep, and it would look like a tragic, unavoidable medical complication. Panic flared in her chest, but her training kicked in. She immediately clamped the line, unhooking it from Damien's arm. Just as she did, the bedroom door clicked open. Dr. Iris stepped in, freezing when he saw Sophia holding the disconnected IV tube. "What are you doing?" "Nurse Grace," Dr. Iris asked, his voice tight. "You shouldn't be tampering with the boss's lines." "The label says antibiotics," Sophia said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous octave. "But this is heparin, a massive dose. Who ordered this?" Dr. Iris's face went pale, then hardened. "You're mistaken. You're just a nurse. Reconnect the line immediately. That is a direct order." "No," Sophia said, stepping in front of the IV pole. She positioned her wide, solid body directly between the doctor and Damien's bed. "If this goes into his vein, he bleeds out in 20 minutes. Dr. Iris reached into his tailored coat, pulling out a silenced pistol. The metal gleamed in the moonlight. "I said reconnect the line, you fat cow, or I'll put a bullet in your head and do it myself." Sophia's heart slammed against her ribs. She was unarmed. She was terrified. But as she looked at the gun, she didn't move. Her father owed bad men money. She knew what monsters looked like. But right now, the man sleeping behind her was her patient. "You'll have to shoot me," Sophia said, her voice shaking, but her stance immovable. "And a gunshot, even silenced, is going to wake Victor down the hall. I drop, I make a loud thud. You won't make it to the front gate." Dr. Iris raised the gun, his finger tightening on the trigger. Suddenly, a massive, scarred hand shot out from the darkness of the bed, grabbing a heavy brass lamp from the nightstand. With a primal roar of agony, Damien hurled the lamp with terrifying precision. It struck Dr. Iris squarely in the jaw with a sickening crunch. The doctor collapsed backward, the gun clattering across the hardwood floor. Sophia gasped, diving for the weapon. She kicked it under the heavy dresser, just as Victor burst through the door weapon, drawn, taking in the chaotic scene. Damien was breathing raggedly, clutching his bleeding side, where the sudden movement had torn his stitches. He looked past Victor, past the unconscious traitor, bleeding on his floor, and locked his dark, intense eyes on Sophia. She had just used her own body to shield a mafia boss from an assassin's bullet. "Victor," Damien rasped, coughing violently. "Throw Aris in the basement and lock down the estate." He fell back onto the pillows, his gaze never leaving Sophia's pale, sweat-streaked face. The mockery and hostility that usually resided in his eyes were completely gone, replaced by a dark, possessive intensity that made the breath catch in Sophia's throat. "You didn't run!" Damien whispered the words heavy with disbelief. Sophia grabbed a fresh towel, pressing it firmly against his bleeding side, her hands shaking for the very first time. "I told you, Mr. Russo, I'm too heavy to run." Damien's hand reached out his bloody, calloused fingers, wrapping firmly around her thick, soft wrist. "Damien. You call me Damien." The morning after, Doctor. Gregory Aris was dragged bleeding into the Russo estate's basement. The atmosphere in the house shifted violently. The quiet, sterile tension of a sick room evaporated, replaced by the electric, volatile energy of a war room. Sophia Grace didn't sleep. She spent the remaining hours of the night meticulously re-sterilizing Damien's IV lines, her mind racing. She had crossed a line. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a witness, a participant, and a blockade against an active assassination plot. When the sun finally crested the horizon, painting the mahogany bedroom in hues of gold, Damien was awake, watching her. His color was better, the grayish pallor of impending shock replaced by a dangerous, predatory vitality. "You're shaking, Sophia." Damien observed his voice, a low, gravelly rasp. It was the first time he had used her first name, and the syllables felt heavy on his tongue. "I have a lot of adrenaline in my system." "Mr. Russo," Sophia replied, keeping her back to him as she restocked the gauze. "And I think I pulled a muscle in my shoulder, kicking that gun under the dresser. I told you to call me Damien." He shifted, wincing slightly, as he pushed himself up against the headboard. "Victor extracted a confession from Aris an hour ago. He was bought out by the O'Rourke Syndicate. Declan O'Rourke wants to absorb my territory while I'm bleeding out in bed." Sophia froze, a cold dread pooling in her stomach. The medical tape slipped from her fingers. "Did you say Declan O'Rourke?" Damien's eyes narrowed, his mafia instincts immediately catching the tremor in her voice. "What do you know about O'Rourke?" Sophia turned around her broad shoulders, slumping under the weight of a sudden, terrifying realization. Her father, Thomas Grace, owed $60,000 in gambling debts. He had never specified who he owed, only that they were Irish, ruthless, and running the docks. The docks belonged to Declan O'Rourke. "My father." Sophia breathed her hands, gripping the edge of the medical cart until her knuckles turned white. "He owes 60 grand to an Irish bookie down by the shipyard. I took this agency job to pay off his debt so they wouldn't kill him." The silence in the room was deafening. Damien stared at her, calculating the puzzle pieces clicking together. "O'Rourke knows you're here," Damien stated coldly. "Aris would have told him the agency sent a new nurse. He would have run a background check on you to see if you were a threat or an asset." Right on cue, Sophia's cheap cell phone vibrated in her scrub pocket. The caller ID was a blocked number. She looked at Damien, terrified. He gave her a single sharp nod. "Answer it." Sophia put the phone on speaker and set it on the nightstand. "Hello?" "Nurse Grace?" A smooth, chillingly cheerful voice echoed through the room. "This is Leo Briggs. I work for Mr. O'Rourke. We have your father Thomas sitting right here with us. Say hello, Tommy." A muffled, agonized groan came through the speaker, followed by the wet sound of a fist hitting bone. Sophia gasped, her thick hands flying to her mouth. "Here is the situation, sweetheart," Leo continued. "Your dad owes us a lot of money, but we hear you've been playing hero at the Russo estate. We can wipe your old man's debt completely clean. All you have to do is take a little vial of potassium chloride, which our friend Dr. Aris conveniently left in the downstairs bathroom cabinet, and inject it right into Damien Russo's IV. He dies of a heart attack, no one is the wiser, and your daddy keeps his kneecaps. You have until midnight." The line went dead. Sophia stood, paralyzed, tears finally welling in her eyes, spilling over her plump cheeks. She looked at the man in the bed. She had a choice to make: the life of her foolish, addicted father, or the life of the ruthless mafia boss she had sworn to heal. She didn't hesitate. She looked Damien dead in the eye. "Where is the downstairs bathroom?" Damien's jaw locked. For a split second, betrayal flashed in his dark eyes, his muscles coiling to strike her if she tried to move toward the door. "You're going to kill me to save a degenerate gambler." "No, you idiot!" Sophia snapped, her voice cracking with raw emotion. "I'm going to get the vial so your men can dust it for fingerprints, and then you are going to tell me exactly how we fake your death so I can get my father back." Damien stared at her. Women in his world screamed. They betrayed. They ran. But this heavily built, exhausted nurse in cheap scrubs was standing her ground, negotiating tactical espionage with a mob boss. A slow, dark smirk spread across Damien's face, the first genuine smile she had seen on him. "Victor!" Damien roared toward the door. The massive bodyguard entered instantly. "Get a tactical team ready," Damien ordered, pushing the blankets off his legs. "And get me my tailored suit, the dark one. We have a rat to catch and my nurse has a debt to settle." "Damien, you can't walk, you'll rip your stitches," Sophia protested, stepping forward to push him back down. Damien caught her wrists. His hands were massive, entirely engulfing hers. He pulled her forward until her soft stomach pressed against his uninjured side, forcing her to look down into his intense, obsidian eyes. "Rule number 4. Sophia," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. "Nobody threatens what belongs to me, and right now, you belong to me." The abandoned warehouse down by the Brooklyn Navy Yard smelled of rust-salt water and impending violence. The rain beat down in sheets against the tin roof. Sophia stood in the center of the dimly lit floor, shivering despite the heavy black trench coat draped over her scrubs. The coat belonged to Damien. It swallowed her entirely, but it smelled of his expensive cologne and gunpowder, a strange, intoxicating comfort. Footsteps echoed from the shadows. Leo Briggs stepped into the light, followed by 2 armed thugs, dragging the battered, bloody form of Thomas Grace. "I see you came alone, sweetheart," Leo sneered, pulling out a flashlight and shining it directly at Sophia. He looked at her wide, heavy frame with overt disgust. "Gotta say, when Aris said a nurse was causing problems, I pictured someone different. But I guess Russo's standards have dropped. Did you do it? Is he dead?" "Show me my father first," Sophia demanded, forcing her voice to stay steady. She planted her feet wide, using her mass to anchor her trembling knees. Leo gestured, and the thugs dumped Thomas onto the concrete. He groaned, reaching a trembling hand out. "Penny, I'm sorry, Penny. I did what you asked," Sophia said loudly, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I pushed the potassium. His heart stopped at 8 p.m. The house is in chaos." I slipped out. Leo grinned, pulling a pistol from his waistband. "Good girl. Unfortunately, we can't leave loose ends. And a fat bleeding heart nurse is the biggest loose end of all. He raised the gun, aiming it at her chest. You're right about one thing, Leo. A dark, lethal voice echoed from the steel rafters above. She is a big problem for you. Before Leo could look up, the skylight shattered. Victor Kovac and 3 of Russo's top enforcers dropped onto the catwalks, raining suppressed gunfire down on O'Rourke's men. The 2 thugs holding Thomas dropped instantly, clutching their chests. Leo panicked, firing wildly at Sophia. Suddenly a massive force slammed into her from the side. Damian Russo, moving with a terrifying, agonizing speed, tackled her to the concrete. He shielded her entire body with his own as Leo's bullet sparked against the metal shipping container behind them. Damian didn't even flinch. He raised a customized heavy-caliber handgun and put a single flawless bullet right between Leo Briggs's eyes. The enforcer collapsed like a puppet with his strings cut. Silence fell over the warehouse, save for the patter of the rain. Sophia lay on her back, gasping for air. Damian was hovering over her, his breathing ragged. His dark suit was damp with rain, and she could see a fresh bloom of crimson soaking through his white dress shirt, where his stitches had undoubtedly torn. "Damian, you're bleeding," she cried, trying to push him off to inspect the wound. "Stop moving," he growled, grabbing her hands and pinning them gently beside her head. He didn't get up. He let his heavy, muscular frame rest fully against her soft, plush curves. He stared down at her, his eyes burning with an emotion so fierce it made her heart stutter. "You're an idiot," Sophia sobbed, overwhelmed by the gunfire, the blood, and the sheer proximity of him. "You could have died. Look at me, Damian. Women who look like me, we don't get rescued. We don't survive in a world of men who look like you." Damian's expression softened a rare, breathtaking vulnerability, cracking his ruthless facade. He reached down his calloused thumb, wiping a stray tear from her plump cheek. "Women who look like you don't exist," he murmured fiercely. "You took a bullet for me. You challenged my men. You stared down a gun to save your pathetic father, and you didn't flinch. You think I care that you don't look like the plastic, hollow women in my world. I crave you, Sophia. I crave your strength, your hands, your softness. I want every inch of you." He didn't give her a chance to argue. Damian lowered his head and captured her lips in a bruising, possessive kiss. It tasted of rain copper and undeniable fire. Sophia gasped against his mouth, her hands instinctively coming up to grip his broad shoulders, pulling him closer. For the first time in her life, her size wasn't a burden, wasn't an obstacle, wasn't a punchline. To the most dangerous man in New York, it was exactly what anchored him to the earth. When he finally pulled away, they were both breathless. "Victor will take your father to a safe house. His debt is gone," Damian declared, helping her sit up. He kept one arm firmly wrapped around her thick waist. "But you are coming home with me, and you are never wearing those cheap scrubs again." Sophia looked at the bodies at her father being loaded into an SUV, and then at the ruthless Mafia king who had just crowned her his equal. She leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady, strong heartbeat she had saved. "Does this mean I get a raise?" Damian threw his head back and laughed, a rich, booming sound that echoed into the rainy Brooklyn night. "It means you get the whole damn kingdom, Mia Regina." And that's how Sophia Grace went from an underpaid, overlooked trauma nurse to the undisputed queen of the most dangerous syndicate in New York. She proved that true strength and beauty don't come in a one-size-fits-all package, and even the most ruthless monster can bow to the right woman. Did you love Sophia and Damian's explosive chemistry, hit that like button, share this story with your fellow mafia romance lovers, and subscribe for more thrilling real-life dramas.